Hey, Dr. Kimberly, it says up there in that corner that the broadcast is live.
Yes, yes, yes. And you are rolling on the road with Dr. Kimberly and Dave. And as Dave so eloquently put it, that I wanted to go into a hornet's nest today.
Oh, and I'm just turning up my studio volume here so I can hear you talk about that hornet's nest. And sometimes you got to walk into the nest.
Sometimes I I often get calls, referrals, and you know, and you start to look at people holistically and say, yeah, you came because you have a disability. However, it may not be the same that everybody thinks that it is.
Right, right.
That there's some other things that are happening that are causing, I think, probably more harm than if it's something that you acquired or you were born with.
Well, and people have a tendency to learn what we teach them.
Unpack that.
I mean, the on the funny side of life, one of my spiritual mentors had the opportunity to go to Rome last summer and meet with the Pope. And for a Catholic guy, that's a pretty cool deal. And he's a simple Franciscan. In the Catholic world, they're supposed to be simple people. And
Mm-hmm.
when he got invited, and he flew from his home in New Mexico to Rome in a private jet owned by a Bolivian billionaire. He was put up in a 4-star hotel, and he was put in like these ambassadorial limos, and they're just driving through Rome with their flashers on, not
Okay.
stopping for
Well, this
red
sounds
lights.
like my kind of life.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
and his comment was, and this is why I love him. He said, St. Francis, when he went to Rome, he walked barefoot. And me, I went in a billionaire's, private jet. And then when he was talking about the limo ride, he just said, driving through red lights, he goes, you get used to that, and so, it's like, um you could just get used to somebody just taking care of you. Melissa and I, we had the great pleasure of going to an all-inclusive resort in end of January, February to celebrate our 30th wedding anniversary. And you get used to people coming up and saying, sir, would you like something to drink? And it doesn't happen in my house. I know. I mean, Melissa, every once in a while, says, hey, you need something from the kitchen, but it's not like, you know, if she's upstairs, I don't ring a bell and she doesn't run down and grab something from
Right.
the kitchen. So I
Mhm.
mean, that's the funny part of it. But if you teach people, oh, don't worry, I'll do it for you. And unfortunately, for a lot of people with disabilities, now of course I'm painting with a huge brush here, but a lot of times people with disabilities will be taught, oh, don't worry, we'll do it for you. And so how much of that self motivation, self advocacy gets stunted with 100% good intentions? Let me do that and again, I'm not saying sometimes, we need to care for each other and help
Right.
each other out. That is absolutely required. At the same time, it's just like, sometimes check your motivations, and then making sure you know what you're teaching people. Because then my last metaphor, we like to talk about, if you give a person a fish, they eat for a day. Teach them how to fish, they eat for a lifetime. And then, Dr. Kimberly, as an entrepreneur, if you give them part of the ownership of the pond, they start building wealth. That's a whole
Yes.
nother cat that we don't talk about in that metaphor, stage 3, which is, ownership. And
Right.
and and again, being an entrepreneur is, I know I'm not, and so that is a definite individual skill set. So all of that comes back to, what are we teaching people? What are people choosing to take advantage of? We could go heavy, deep, and real on the psychological part of that. You teach people to treat me like crud, be it a spouse or a partner. And you can go, we don't want to go on those tangents. We're just going to talk about that customer client kind of relationship.
And I think that, for me, and I say it all the time, I don't have the capacity to babysit you. That's not me. That's just not me. And not that I'm not sympathetic or empathetic, but I agree that when you've had so many people sit there and babysit you and coddle you and say, okay, I got it. And I'm just like, no, we you need to work this, work the plan until you can't work it anymore. And then you revise the plan and you keep working the plan.
Right, right. Well, and again, it's like, in what's the word that comes to mind? One doesn't right now, but in comparison to the conversations of our last 3 or 4 episodes related to your really cool trip out to New York, when you rightly pointed out about the number of times that people took care of you and pampered you, and like that was their job, that was your expectation as their customer. And I know that the the times before and after that, you are digging your own foxholes, accessible ones now, and you're doing that work for yourself. You're not just waiting for, like every day is going to be like your trip to New York, right?
Well, actually, there's let's qualify that trip to New York, right? So it wasn't that it was things that I couldn't do for myself. I was receiving really great customer service.
Exactly.
I was being included. It was a forethought, and accommodations were made. I wasn't expecting them to cut the food up on my plate, and spoon feed me. No, not that, but just, coming in, making sure there wasn't a major disruption while they were taking me to my table, and, anticipating, like certain needs,
Yep.
making sure that my water was filled, and, you know, did I have everything, all the right utensils, things like that. That's just good customer service,
Exactly.
you know, and it's not, well, I don't need anybody to think for me. I told them what accommodations I needed, and then they were available to me when I got there. And that's the difference between me coming in, me not telling them, and then getting there, and everybody is like, oh my God, what do we need to do now?
Well, exactly. That
There's a major difference.
yep, that venue is that. I mean, if you go to the the simplest of restaurant in Grand Rapids, you expect a level of customer service. I mean, that's just that business. And that's what they're in the business to provide that customer service, as opposed to um, what I like about our mission statement here at Disability Advocates. We state that our mission is to work alongside, which means we work alongside. We don't do for, we do alongside. You've got to be doing something. And again, it's all within your abilities and capacity, and how do we help and coach and mentor and all that stuff. Oh my gosh, Heidi.
Hey,
Heidi.
hey, Heidi, Dave is home.
Oh, as a quick aside, Heidi, I'm going to be calling you soon. Just be forewarned. But anyways, back to the matter at hand. Like, we had a fantastic event here today at Disability Advocates. something that I know you've participated in the past, Dr. Kimberly. We did a series of mock interviews with about 25, 30 high school students, and it was just fantastic. And these kids are, I say kids, these students are ready for the adult world. And, I had the opportunity to ask a couple beforehand, are you nervous? And they're like, oh, yeah. And I said, yeah, it's good to be nervous. I'm nervous all the time. And we chuckled about it, but they were nervous. And then I talked to the same group of kids afterwards. And then I said, are you still nervous? And like, no. And they're bragging up about, I had 3 interviews. I had 4. And again, they did the work. We worked alongside to help them get prepped, but they did the work, and they're learning. They're going to have to do the work now. Once they get that job, then they got to show up on time, do the work, and all that stuff. And so it was just this awesome piece to say, we did so little, all things being equal, for these students today. We helped provide the container where they could practice being themselves. And part of themselves is to present their skills and abilities to potential employers. And so, but we're not going to call them every morning. Hey, it's 6 o'clock, time to get up.
Right.
We got 400 phone calls to make at 6 a.m. because we're going to call 400 kids to wake up. We don't do that. So.
But then we have adults who use the system. And I know one of the things that you will provide, if someone wants to come, you'll say, hey, don't worry about the cost. Don't worry about transportation. We can get you a Go Bus ticket and we can pay for your ticket to the event. At what point, if you have 6 events a year that you're inviting the same people to, and it's, every time they need a ticket and they need transportation, at what point do you say, we've done this for you for a whole year. Next year, let's work on you getting a ticket and you also getting your transportation.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely could be a future possibility. In my few years here, I have very, very rarely felt that somebody hasn't, or that somebody has taken advantage of us.
I don't want to use the word taken advantage of. I don't want to say that.
But are you saying instead that we're not
It's
giving them the opportunity to kind of do
right.
some more for themselves?
Absolutely. It goes back to taking ownership and, coming alongside instead of saying, for the last 2 years, we have made sure that you've gotten here. How about this year? We're going to figure out how you can make yourself come here.
Uh-oh. Did I freeze or did you freeze?
Me, I didn't freeze.
Okay, then it was me. Um,
So I was just saying, if for 2 years in a row, you've always provided for me, and to be able to say, okay, this is year 3,
mhm.
I think it's time that we kind of snip some of the apron cords and say, we know that we have 6 events that you want to attend. Let's start in January to figure out how you can, get your own Go Bus tickets, and you're going to pay for your ticket to at least one event this year.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely agree with that. Um, I'm going to say in theory, and then there's who's Kristen Michelle Costello.
We don't know who that is, Heidi. She said
So
typo.
typo. Definitely the start saving and when and how people can participate in that. What you laid out, Dr. Kimberly, it's more the staff that are putting on the events are very, very focused on um, getting the event done. And then it would be then our independent living staff that would work alongside folks to say, all right, the way you just said it, let's talk about this. I mean, is there an opportunity for growth here for you to figure out your own, pay for your own way? And again, not as a punishment, shaming, anything like that. It's to say, hey, um, uh, to move on. Like, going to CIL Legislative Day. Now there, the challenge is, transportation to Lansing, and wanting to have a good turnout. And if somebody's given us all day as a volunteer, making sure we have the budget to get somebody to Lansing and home again. Unless it's Heidi, we might leave her in Lansing. No, we've never would leave Heidi in Lansing.
Yes, we would.
Yes. So I could tell so many funny stories, but I won't. But I mean, in all seriousness, it does depend on the event. It does depend on the person. And then for us are we as an organization aware enough to say, all right, here's a person that this could be a great opportunity for them to do some growing. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. And it's not just, I don't want to say it's just in the disability community. I've had an opportunity to work on a plethora of things, and there are some people that stay in the same situation. Like, there are some people who are unhoused almost at the same time every year. And you'll say, look, didn't we just get you housing, got everything set up, and now you lost everything again? And that's what I'm saying. And then you kind of go through all of the agencies, and you look for new agencies, if you will, that you can start to tell your story to. But then, we all do communicate with each other, and we say, hey, look, got this client here. And they're like, oh yeah, what is this? Is this April? Well, according to our records, every April, this is what we experience with them. And then you say, well, has anybody had a conversation? No. We just, they come to the agency, we do what's required, we give them what they need, and then, we see them again next year. Well, is anybody going to sit and tell them that, are they doing this intentionally? What's happening? That's the piece that I'm looking at, that there are people who use, and I don't even want to use the word, I think you said take advantage of, and it's not taking advantage. It's, again, how are we teaching them to live their own self-directed life?
Yep. No, I mean, great points. And then to know that on that smaller, well, not small, but a true example, many moons ago, there was a woman that liked volunteering with us who had a chronic mental health condition. And we were just very clear with her. If you're using your medication, which is your choice to use it or not, but if you're using it, you can come volunteer. And if you're not welcome. And that's our choice, because of the severity of her mental health condition, you knew quite easily if she was on her medication or not. And I definitely, at a tiny level, empathize with her struggles, because the medication was very strong, and that's why you knew she was on it, because it just so, the word depressed her energy level.
Yes.
And so she didn't like taking it. And so anyways, it's just, but where do you cross that line, or at least put those lines up? And then, um, yeah, and
Yeah.
definitely, Heidi, if there's some issues where, as you were saying, Dr. Kimberly, every April the person kind of cycles, they lose their housing, they crash, and then it's like, all right, are we going to spend another whatever? Another true story internally. There was a person, we used to do nursing facility transition services more directly. We still do, and we still help in that process.
Hmm.
But there was an issue that was brought up with one of our sister organizations in the state, that this guy wanted to transition out of the nursing home because they wouldn't let him fall out of his wheelchair drunk, and he wanted to go on a bender, and then he knew, he literally said that he was going to go out on a bender in a week or two. He would crash so hard he'd end up in the ER, and they'd put him back in the nursing home, and he'd had a fun trip. And it was just like, that is his choice, and it is our choice not to expend state and federal resources to help this person, like, go out and, from our position of judgment, to waste thousands of dollars of time and energy, and thousands of real dollars on down payment assistance and helping, because
Hmm.
he was going to lose everything in the apartment when, of course, they, yeah. So and that's an extreme case. And some people might say, Dave, how dare you be holier than thou? And it's definitely the tougher cases are closer to the line. You know, is this,
But
and
that's the reality, though.
yeah,
You know, and making those decisions. Because if I look at your track record and I know that about you, then there has to be somebody that will give him that hard truth and say, you need to make a decision. And our agencies even allowed to do that. Because like I had a situation a couple weeks ago, and the big pharma, if you will, said, as much as we want to say A, B, C, and D, we have to stay within these guidelines. But providing gap services can say that, you know. Um, and I guess that's what precipitated, or I should say, should be the impetus for this show, is, as everybody responds, because this is the textbook way of responding to the issue. And I say, okay, that's good and that's fine. However, as I'm looking through, I see some consistencies with being inconsistent. You like that? Mhm.
yep,
That you are consistent with being inconsistent, and you are consistent with A, B, C, D, and E. Now, as an agency, are you still required to, to expend all of this time, energy, and these monies that you're giving out? And you have a person over here that doesn't get the opportunity because of the recidivism of other folks.
yeah. Again, that is a very real concern, especially some of our um, the more costly things we do. In the sense that, if we were to help somebody via a home assessment, and we get a ramp, and we can do ramps at rental properties through some of the funding we have. Most of it's home owner occupied. But so anyways, we put a $4,000 or $5,000 ramp at an apartment, and then the next month you lose the apartment and you get a new apartment, and then you say, hey, I need another ramp. And it's like, well, how do you, and it's like, well, get to the back of the line. But eventually, then the next day somebody else calls and says, hey, I want a ramp, or I need a ramp. And it's their first time they've ever called us. Does this person, second time through, never get back to the front of the line? So yeah.
Okay, so for some with a disability, well, because people feel bad, if they don't help or if they don't do something. However, just because you have a disability doesn't mean that you get to abuse the system or
Yep.
that you don't grow up. I guess that's the um, best way to put it, is that you don't grow up. Now, I do believe that there are some people who just need someone to come alongside them and do some direct, you know, um, guidance, mentoring, assisting, especially if they want to live independently and maybe they don't have a lot of family around to help them. I think that we can do that. But I guess I'm just kind of frustrated when you have this packet of people who are not getting what they need because you always have the same group of people that are accessing services and using up the resources and the funding. And you have someone, and this is their first time, and they go to access, and it's not there or available for them.
Right.
And, what are I don't even want to say moral, but I think that would be part of it. Um, and I don't think that you're being judgmental or the big bad wolf, but you keep a file on every person. And if I look at your file and I see that you've been with us for 5 years, you've accessed our services, and you haven't grown past this, then I think as an agency, you have a responsibility to say to that person, all right, it's time for some tough love.
Hmm.
We need to have a conversation.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And because there was a person though, and I don't know if we still have his file because maybe he has been he had died long enough ago for us to, our own record retention. But his file had to be that thick, no exaggeration.
I
However,
understand.
however, for him, he was he always gave back, and he volunteered in different ways, and he was one of those weird people, weird, um, that fell through. That's a technical term, folks. He fell through the cracks because he had a severe mental health condition and he was gainfully employed. So community mental health didn't work with him because he wasn't on Medicaid, and his own private insurance. Most private insurance stinks um, when you need mental health services, especially 10, 15 years ago. And so, like this guy, um, he was a joy to have around, and he grew. I mean, when I first met him almost 28, he would, and again, because he's died, confidentiality has disappeared. But he spoke most of his story on a video that we did. You can go to our YouTube page and see him. But anyways, he would go, like, if he used ketchup tonight at supper, he would go to the store tomorrow and he's like, oh my gosh, I need ketchup. I used it last night. And his trailer, he had a single wide trailer before he bought a house, and we helped him build. I mean, we didn't really help him much. We, encouraged him. He bought his own house and moved where he wanted to. But when he first got divorced, his single wide trailer, if he had 10, he had 100 bottles of ketchup. And he would have, because he's like, I just don't know what I'm doing. And we had a staff person that helped him just put his grocery list together. And again, because no one in the mental health system would work with him because he wasn't on Medicaid, and private insurance said, oh, we don't pay for that. So we helped this guy stay independent and flourish. Um,
You
and
provided, so you ended up being the baby and providing gap services like I do,
yep,
you know.
exactly,
And I think
exactly.
that is a great example because that type of person, you really want to help. They do need it. And people like him may not get what it is they need from you or other agencies because you have those that are always in the system that do have Medicaid, that maybe does have good insurance that can kind of help them. And so you have a person like this that's not getting what it is that they need. You know, they say that the squeaky wheel gets the oil, but what happens, at some point, don't you get too much oil and you get greasy and you start sliding around and you need to start, doing something a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And I guess, is there enough emotional intelligence within the agency and enough personal bravery and courage to be able to say to the client, hey, look, I'm like the fifth worker in the last, 3 years that you've had. And I'm looking at this. We need to sit down and have a heart to heart conversation.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'm aware of, fortunately for us as an organization, just a handful of folks that we've had to have those conversations with because we don't. Um, Most of our support is that navigation, and so like
Mhm.
we don't provide food, we don't provide rental vouchers, we help you find those front doors. And so that piece of uh, the other organizations in town that do that, and so then they, you know, are the ones that have those tougher conversations. If somebody's as a navigator, and I used to hang out more in the Hartside neighborhood, somebody would ask me for, a couple bucks so they can get a meal. And I'd, look at my watch and it's like, hey, well, God's Kitchen serves at 2:30. And they would look at me and they're like,
That's
because,
what I wanted.
yeah, because and a few times people would say, oh, I know what time they serve. I don't want that. And it's just like, all right, that's your choice. And I'm choosing not to give you any money. And I mean, that's not every time, but many times. And so um, we have that. The word that comes to mind is almost luxury as navigators. We don't have to have those tough conversations because we don't. The gaps that we fill, again, are more navigation
Hmm.
and peer support, IL skills training, as opposed to, hey, I need $50 so I can pay my utility bill. It's like, and if that person comes 3 months in a row, now, of course, I hope for our team, if somebody calls and is like, hey, I need help, and we send them to 211, or if we know the front doors to call, next month they call again and we send them to the same place, that we do have take a moment and say, hey, do you want to come in and chat about why every month you run out of, what's the saying, you run out of money before month?
You got too much month for your money.
There you go. And so what are the roots of that?
Hmm.
Because we do with our family support services, we sit down with folks. As I characterize it, we put everything on the table. What kind of benefits do they get? What kind of
Hmm.
benefits are they eligible for? Are they, one time a extremely well-intentioned case manager helped somebody apply for $10 more for something, and then they lost $100 over here, and we're like, no, you got to know how they all hit each other.
Right.
And so, but again, there we navigate and we help people apply. We don't decide either on the giving food, or we don't decide, are you eligible for SNAP benefits or not. So I mean, it's just we're in a, again, I'm going to just label it luxury today, because we aren't forced to have that many tough conversations.
We're at 100 shades. We do.
Yeah.
We have those conversations.
Oh, I mean, and I can imagine. I mean, I remember a story. Somebody once got like flagged by the FBI or custom service, like trying to buy too many iPads, or that, like somehow you had some criminal enterprise because you were buying too many iPads so you could give them away. Back in the early
That
days of COVID.
that was funny.
But
They were
the
like,
funny,
wait a minute, what are you
yeah.
doing? Are you reselling these things or what? I was
That's
like,
against the
no,
law, ma'am. And it's like, I'm trying to do a good deed. No good deed goes unpunished.
finished.
And
So unfortunately, I can't do that program anymore because they were like, they did track it. They did see that, there was nothing. However, they said, we don't need you to be our third wheel. We could do it ourselves. And then they never did it. So,
right. And then I think for today's conversation, would the analogy be, so if somebody got an iPad today from you, if you were still doing it, or even if somebody got an iPad from you 2 years ago and they say, hey, Dr. Kimberly, are you still giving away iPads? I need a new one. And you're like, well, why? Well, my old one broke, or I lost it, and it's like, well, didn't you
actually,
save
they got
money?
2 years. They
Yeah.
actually got 2 years of Apple Care that covered. I paid for
Yep.
that as well,
Yep.
for 2 years. And, after the 2 years, then now, let's see, this year, they would have to be responsible for it themselves.
Yeah. And then, as a couple people pointed out, and you've said, Dr. Kimberly, so I got my new iPad. Did I just get addicted to it? And I got dependent on it. And I just assumed I'd get another free one when this one broke, as opposed to, am I saving money knowing that this is going to cost a few $100s when the time comes? How do I get the dollars so I'm ready for that?
Yep.
And yeah.
And I mean, and if you keep it in halfway, decent condition, Apple does allow you to trade it in,
Oh
and
yeah.
and they give you credit, and then you get the next item. But trust, I mean, just some of the stories that came. There were some people who were applying, and it was their kid's birthday, or it was getting close to a holiday, and they wanted to get, nope, that's not what this is for. We're not buying your kid an iPad just because. I mean, did we have some really great stories? Absolutely. Were there other ways that they could have gotten, not necessarily an iPad, but they would have gotten an something, or
Yep.
some sort of pad? Absolutely. I mean, almost all the school systems were giving out the Google Chrome. So I wasn't going to duplicate that, just because you wanted an iPad versus Google Chrome.
Yep.
No, it doesn't work that way.
Yep.
So I think we had an opportunity to take a lot of liberty and to be able to say those things and respond back. Because one of the things that I did do was I had a team of 7 people. So as the applications came in, I didn't look at them. I farmed them out. and gave them to the selection committee. And the only time I got involved is if, everybody said, let's say 6 people said no and one person said yes. So I'm like, okay, why did you all say no? Why do you see a yes? When it was, or even if it was 6 yeses and one no, then is there something that that person is seeing that the other 6 did not see?
Yep.
And, that's when I got involved. But for the most part, it was always, as they were reading, pretty unanimous. And I know one lady was really upset because we had people whose names were very, very close, and one was approved and the other wasn't. And so, because I did not, it was a unanimous no for one and a unanimous yes for the other, that I didn't even, get involved until she started, making posts on social media. And I said, okay, let me see what's going on here. So I go through everything and I let her know that whoever sent her the correspondence, it was an error, saying that, they would receive it because there were two, your name and someone else's name were very close. And I said, and when I went back through the application, I said, it was a unanimous no for you. So I can't even override that because
Right.
it was a unanimous no from my whole team. So I don't think she was really happy about that. But when I looked at their reasoning, it was kind of the same thing, that maybe they were using, their child situation to obtain, a nice, expensive piece of, electronic, and that they probably could afford to get one on their own
Yep. Yep.
and didn't need this process. And, and that's the other thing is, it's kind of a joke, but there are some people that have said, hey, I've been on food stamps so long, I've never had to pay for my groceries. So, I get cash in other ways, whether they have a job or they receive cash assistance, but they've never had to use cash to buy groceries. And the reality of, oh my God, this is how much this costs. Yeah, it's different when it's coming out of your pocket than when you just swipe the card.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's situations like that. And that's how they all felt about this particular family, is they could more than afford to purchase an iPad. They just didn't want to have to. And if somebody was giving something away free, then they should have it.
Yep.
So I think, we look at it being more, what's the word I want to use? I would say the larger you are, you don't necessarily look at all of that. It's like, okay, we have a budget. This is the service that we provide. And so you're not so much micromanaging in that respect, unless you get a caseworker that says, hey, look, Dave, John's been in here 15 times. I'm sorry if your name is John, just picked it out of the air. But, John has been in here. He moves every year. We've given him a ramp, and it's a removable ramp, and he could pick it up and take it with him. But because it's not like he plans to move, he gets evicted, all his stuff is out there, and he doesn't have the wherewithal to take the ramp with him. So he comes back to us to get a ramp every time he moves. Okay, we can't keep doing that.
Yep.
But even if it's, hospital equipment, whether it's a portable toilet, or you guys come in and put in, rails, shower assist, that stuff starts to add up.
Right. Well,
Absolutely.
and then it's the and you know because he's a veteran, we are able to tap other resources. But this guy had a an aluminum ramp in his garage, and
Mhm.
somebody stole that and his aluminum ladder. I don't know. I mean, he had the ladder probably, for friends, family, whatever, to help him do things around the house, or if it was an older one. But I mean, that somebody stole these things from him, and then so we're just like, we got a. I mean, I say we, but it was Judy and her team. They just got a hold of the distributor and said, "Hey, if this was," and it was the week before Christmas. It's like, look, just deliver it. We'll figure it out a way to pay for it, and we did. But that idea of how far should you go? It's a lot of it's dependent. If this person, if he sold it so he could buy a pack of cigarettes, and he sold that aluminum ramp for scrap, then we'd have a different conversation.
Right.
All
Well,
wacky good.
it is. And I actually have a paraladder that I've had since, oh my gosh, this is my 10th year in a wheelchair. So I've had it 10 years.
Paraladder.
Yeah. And guess what? It still has the original wrapping on it. Yep, it does. It's still in really great condition. And yeah, this is my 10th year. Yep,
Wow.
yep, yep, yep. So I got to tell you something. You know what time it is? It is now 4:47.
Holy moly.
We've had a great conversation. This has been a good one, a nice one to kind of unpack and think about.
Absolutely. Folks, and I mean, at the end of the day, you've you've listened. There's no easy answers. um, there are some organizations in town that their easy answer might be based on income, you know, and it's like, oh, you make $1 too much, you're not qualified. We're not sorry, because that's where you got to draw the line. But for the most part, it's a lot of good people out there. Look at that. Look at that. Yeah, I mean, if there's should be plenty of part-time opportunities. That same person, Heidi, could talk to our benefits planning staff. Like, how do you make sure that you don't make $1 too much, because Social Security will boot you off that system if you make $1 too much,
Absolutely.
and
And
one
then,
dollar too much is not a lot of money.
and it's not. And we can always refer them to the My Able account.
Yep.
And I mean, so there's a lot of things that you can do. It's just, knowing and getting to the right person. So we want to say thank you so much for tuning in. And hopefully today we shared something that if you're a consumer or a client, that you stop and you think a little bit about what are some of my habits. And then again, as an agency, to say, am I doing the very best I can to help you? Or am I enabling you? And we want to say thank you as we, approach. This is our 3rd year. Wow.
We're just a few weeks away from the third anniversary, May 7th.
We are. So hopefully we can have some folks that were on at the very beginning and have a really great time. My voice is starting to go. It held up about 48 minutes, and I'm grateful. And
Amen, amen. Well, you getting better, gol darn it. And folks, we'll be chatting soon.
absolutely, thank you so much for for tuning in.